Hello, everyone. This is an interim for YouTube Masterclass. Dr. Sheley, Calarts, USC, Harvard. These are not worth any points on your scorecard. They're just worth watching to stay kind of up to date on everything that's been going on with the Aaron Sheley Masterclass, the Dr. Sheley Masterclass. And there's a lot of things we got to keep track of. I mean, somewhere on Facebook, we know that we've kept track of that. We had film criticism 2, and film special effects all 1 year. And then the second year just ended where they did Griffith, Tarantino, and then we're going to end it with the Westerns in the summer. And then we'll get to the fourth year, which is weird how years jump like that, but it'll be the fourth year, technically fall of the third year, but fall of the fourth year is pretty much 2025. Fall. And I've thought about teaching a lot of different courses for fall. Like, we've got the Western all squared out. Like, I could teach that now and start my class and have it done, whip through it. We'll go through it decently, but not too fast. We know that material, the Western. Now, there's some material I'm familiar with in terms of genres, and since we're switching over to genre, we have to explain that genre is the course of the medium which follows the myth, convention, and iconography of a specific set of characteristics that are infused into a story, narrative story, for setting to be removed, like in the past, or for place to be removed, like on another planet. I mean, there are ways to remove realistic things in stories, and kind of what you get the opinion is the thing that was removed, it was realistic, gives away the unrealistic, the picture we make in metaphors sometimes in genres. And genres develop from a number of places, like the Western genre really developed from the Great Train Robbery. But even before that, the century before, some of those Western novels that were coming out in the 1800s were kind of modeled after even the Book of Mormon, which has all these Western stories in it that are like the Old West, and it's mostly Native Americans in the Book of Mormon. And I'm not saying that we have to agree with the religion of it. I'm just saying that, like, these Indian battles are already starting to set themselves up, cowboy and Indian battles. And India is a bad word to use, really, for that, because it was a misnomer that Christopher Columbus put on thinking he was in the Indies. Now there's India, the country, and that's where real Indians come from. But Indians, in terms of Native Americans, we confuse all the time. And we shouldn't, but we do. All of us do. It's like black and African American. It gets confused. Now, black can be used as a term to describe somebody, but wouldn't you rather use African American and sound smarter? But you're looking at me. I don't always sound smart. Sometimes I'm defending one guy over here for doing this, and then I'm defending a guy for doing something contradictory, and just hoping that some of my classmates never meet each other because of the discussions I've had and whatever else. But the point is a genre, the word comes from the word generic. But the generic doesn't mean like mediocre. It just means the usual product that's put before you of that kind. So it's of a kind. So let's look at genre. Well, genre is like a fittable mythology in cinema, because in cinema, the characteristics of the genre are played out by the production design. They're played out by the production design, like what's built on the set is different for each genre. You know, it's like gangster films look different than westerns because of the sets they build that fit the day and age of each genre spectacle. And you look at the gangster film, it kind of starts out at Musketeers of Pig Alley with Griffith and goes all the way through to like this kind of later Inherent Vice type movie, you know, this Big Lebowski type thing that's way off the gangster path, but still kind of connected to these chewy, big sleep gangster mysteries, hard-boiled detective stories. And I'm not saying the dude from the Big Lebowski is a hard-boiled detective, but strangely enough, his passive, subjective outlook is kind of the same as one of those detectives. You're just kind of rolling along with the punches, see where the story will take you. And I like the Coen brothers for demythologizing genres that way, for taking the genre and kind of putting it up on itself and saying, we've upended the genre because it was going to be upended, you know, if we were to portray it anything like the classical version. Now, not all classical movies are outdated in a way, because you look at the movie Sullivan's Travels and the social issues film that it is, as well as comedy by Preston Sturges, you get this sense that like they're making a movie about the making of a movie, which is about the writing of a script, which is about accidentally wanting to go homeless to write the best script and then accidentally really getting knocked out and lost on the homeless trail. And you go from big director to lost on the homeless trail with amnesia, and your script's not getting written. And these are all, but that whole idea of a script not getting written is really one of the scariest types of films that Hollywood has on Hollywood. Like, you take a look at In a Lonely Place, and it's basically about writer's block. And this has got Humphrey Bogart, and I think it's a Nicholas Ray film, In a Lonely Place, and he's always lonely, and he's always quoting his own scripts, and no one's listening, and no one's reading him, and he hasn't like really had a successful script yet, and he's written so many that he's got writer's block now. And I don't know if writing too much will give you writer's block, but it seems like if you overstimulated certain characteristics in your writing, then that may have been what burned you out the minute you were trying to emphasize that in reality to your friends that these are the reasons I'm writing this book. You could get really lost, because a reason you write a book isn't just a single page, it's all the pages there. They've all got to be connected. Now, we were talking with the classroom a little bit today, with a live classroom, about dangerous movies or dangerous books or dangerous music. Now, I don't really believe that any object in and of itself, especially just if it's a transmitter, things that are already there, that they're faking to put on there. It's not a real newscast about War of the Worlds or anything, right? It's not feigning to be a realistic thing. But say you're watching The World of Berlin of Alexander Plots by Fassbinder, and it takes a certain element to story and goes through it and does it kind of like in this melodrama background of the Third Reich doing business and him having to do business with them, but not being really sure which girl he's going to end up, and being mean to the girl that's nice to him and nice to the girl that's mean to him. There's all these nuances of narrative. And the nuances of narrative are taking us like through this Nazi regime, but they're done like Das Boot. They're done as like heroes. Semi-heroes in Berlin Alexander Plots. But I personally, as much as I can respect it more than any other, that there were a lot of Germans killed in World War II, and even with the Nazis, any of them survived in Germany. And I wonder if we put too much emphasis in our world on what book or what movie or what music corrupted us. It used to be back in the old days that it was a type of philosophy. Everybody's on earth has got to be a Christian because the Pope says so. But then one person comes out with atheist, and they just start torturing and killing any of the atheists, and there's only like 2 or 3 of them anyway. But my thing is like, if you look at a holy book by anything, and I mean like a holy book, I know the unholy book of the devil is one thing, right? But you can read the unholy book of the devil without becoming the devil just as much as you can read the holy book of God without becoming a holy book of God. You aren't what you read. Like, sometimes you're assigned things to read, and if you're assigned things to read, how could you be that thing that you're assigned? The whole class would turn into it. And I doubt if everyone in the class right now pulled out their copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf and started reading it, some of us would get good ideas from it, some of us couldn't make any sense of it, and some of us would get bad ideas from it. It's a well-written text, and it is argumentative, but it's like, well, maybe we're not all taking this the same way. That's what's weird about the core of readership versus writership. You have to eventually compare the lit and make meaning out of it. And that meaning all derives from earlier symbols and signs from earlier culture developing language. And it kind of, in a way, goes back to this sort of suppressive Latin. Because we can trace Latin back to Greek, but the Latin language is what's actually governing all these other languages to come about. We're not talking about Far East languages. I don't know about Japan and China. I don't know how they do those calculated pictures that mean letters, but that's how our letters developed too, were pictures of objects that looked like a word that letter represented. And they started that with Greek, like, yeah, if you're in a fraternity, like I'm in Sigma Nu, and so it has like the sigma, the sigma, and then it has the nu. And it's like, so if you have the sigma nu symbol, you're expressing two letters from the S and the N from the book of Greek letters. And in that particular case, they mean a fraternity. And I shout out to my fraternity because I went about it kind of the weird way on the fraternity. I lived there for all I could. But when I was doing undergraduate, but I told them I didn't want to swear in as a member until I was done with graduate school, because then I could really focus on fraternity things. And boy, would I love to focus on fraternity things only. But shout out to Dave and Chris, the guys that got me there. And when I got into some accident one time, they brought me to Sigma Nu and inducted me in, even though my stipulation was not until I get a PhD, and my PhD was far off. It's far off from now, in the past now already, because I got it 5 years ago. And if you can believe it, I'm done with the 4-year trial period, but I'm kind of based on this very precarious wait of when tenure actually kicked in. And now I'm being challenged by different authorities on, did I go by the book, by the school standard to graduate? And it's hard for some people to admit I did, because it was such a hard program, and I'm such a dumbass sometimes that it makes it hard to believe that I went this far. But small books can be very intellectual, like quantum physics, theories of relativity, natural selection. Those are all very weighty books on intellectual subjects, and they're not easy to get through. They may make you think differently, but let's go back to the freaking point. I think the reason that Obama is no longer destroying books from libraries that have the N-word in it, like Mark Twain has the N-word, so get rid of Mark Twain. Well, I agree that's not for kids, but I'm beginning to realize that when you're reading or interested in something like a movie, you have to be disaffected. Like, I know a lot of people that saw Natural Born Killers and didn't run out and become killers. There were some that probably did in secret, but one thing about the movie is they're not in secret. They're just cruising along some unknown highways. So they're kind of a secret, but they're not. Because everybody knows they're boot splattering all the way through Texas, and they're not stopping until they get to the prison where they can blow the whole place up. And I'm just saying, this is like a simulation, and this is an earlier version of what catharsis means. If you were to see an explosion and see someone die, it's like not really conflict resolution anymore, is it? It's the no closure pact. The no closure pact is a cliffhanger that goes wrong. It's like, well, here's your cliffhanger. It needs closure. Will he fall off the cliff? And then suddenly a bomb hits it, and now you've got the second guessing of it all to say, would that have hit us otherwise? And I'm telling you, for an example, that there's books on subjects we don't like, and in school they're always giving us subjects we don't like, and that's one of the reasons to strengthen us on the subjects we don't like. We usually tell them what subjects we don't like, and those are subjects they strengthen us on. But that's not totally what's going on with the left-wing thing implemented in schools. That has more to do with democracy, and how democracy includes all groups of political people, theoretically, even Republicans. So you really don't need two systems. You got democracy, Republicans included in democracy, everything else is included in democracy. Libertarianism is a hard one to fit into democracy because it's more like an autocracy of the aristocracy. But let's just focus on one thing at a time. I'm not going to sit down and read The Fountainhead and then the Communist Manifesto and then somehow try to combine those books. It's like water and oil. I'm not going to read the Communist Manifesto and go, wow, that was the Communist Manifesto, and I just read it, and that made me... I've actually read it in real life 4 or 5 times, the whole thing. And it's not a lot. It's about a book, 300-page book, Marx and Engels, The Ideology of Capitalism or whatever. And I like those books, and the Production of Supernature and all those. I read the whole thing. I could quote it and quote it. Let's quote something from the middle. It says, the exact acerbic rate of what is in one's mind is the sweat filled from every pore as he's doing the labor, a free way of clearing the mind among the soul, says Karl Marx. So with the sweat of his brow, he's getting the toxins out, he's clearing his mind, It's a very vivid picture that you wouldn't expect in this sort of scaly skeleton book that's the Communist Manifesto. Now, I can see her and preach it and say everybody at Berkeley's got to believe it, but I don't personally believe it. I don't believe in communism because I don't think there's a way to represent everyone on earth with money, which is almost a communist tactic to tell you, because not all people rely on money, but those that do and have a lot of it aren't too worried about someone that they can't reach that's starving to death because they can't reach them. Like, that's why the kids in China are starving, is because I can't mail my plate there when I'm done. Right? Now, hear me out. There could be a million views on how communism becomes capitalism, etc. My whole thing is, why find it threatening at all? It's just a book, dude. I mean, like Marx, he's a Hegelian, he's a philosopher king. He writes Darwinian things about nature. He writes about nature's mixed with reality, and then he writes about how, like, food, clothes, and a place to live are all we really essentially need in life. And then goes on to say, but the production of labor is not for money, it's to upkeep the society. And since we all live in this society, we upkeep it. Now, this gets really tricky because we do the same thing in America, only we give the money to the people that do the work. And this is why capitalism functions much better. You'll see that if you're doing work to earn money to achieve the things that you want through getting enough money, or having stability, or paying off your debt, or whatever else, then these money vibes start to kind of disaffect too. You're starting to say, I use money in a capitalist way. It's a different way. It's to earn to earn it, you have to work the hours. And the harder the job, the more you get paid, theoretically. Or the higher up in this company you are, the more you get paid. But that's usually a lot of times so you can pay people lower in the company what they get, and then you get yours. And it, gosh, turns out to be practically communism anyway by the time everybody's all shared it off evenly, right? They did the same amount of work on the same difficult instruments. But now, I've read the Communist Manifesto 3 times. I've read a lot on capitalism, like with Locke and Rousseau, and even Derrida's critique of capitalism with Marx and Tone, and I read John Hosper's, the libertarians, and Rand. And so far, I don't agree with really any of them on money. I think these are all one perspective coming from one author that's affected the whole world. And books really do affect the whole world. But as a reader and a strengthening college student, you should really get past what's bothering you about it, and that is that you don't really agree or believe in it. But I don't think you have to agree or believe in something that an author is saying to agree or believe in the book. Like, is that some sort of threat? What's the author going to do to me if I don't believe it? Now, my teachers at Berkeley may want me to believe it, and to them, I explain to them the parts I do believe, like capital interest and labor production and putting jobs out in specific castes and things like that make sense because they're all performing this sort of technological industrial jump to the decades to come of proto-capitalism. And that's what we live in now in the world, is proto-capitalism. It's so capitalistic that all the money we owe now is just to pay back the money we owed a long time ago, which is just to pay back the money we owed a long time ago. And that's going to make us rich because then everything will be paid off and we'll own the planet, right? But you still have to do it through toil, work, and division of labor. Now, what I don't like about communism is you toil, division of labor, and all you're getting in return is clothes, food, drink, maybe a smidgen of tobacco if you're lucky, and a bunk bed. But you would have gotten that anyway, right? I mean, isn't that someone's inalienable rights in some places? Like a place to sleep, a place to eat, and a place to go to the bathroom, and a place to take a shower? Asking too much? And really in communism it is, because all of those things require maintenance. They require practicing, paying your bill. They require exploring how you can get the most out of your, electronic device, etc. And utilitarianism kind of comes in with communism and says, well, we don't need money because it's useless because we get everything we need already taken care for us. And that's why we work, is because everything's taken care of for us. Capitalism's not like that. It's like the rich come in, they set up the government, they say, you want what we have? You're going to work 10 times as hard, and maybe we'll throw you a crumb. But it's still a better system because then you can take that crumb and say, this was thrown at me by the boss, and actually it's a crumb of gold, and I'm going to buy a new race car with it, or whatever you can do. Like, you can trade it. Trading's capital. One thing they forget in communism is trading doesn't really work in communism. You just give someone something or you don't. Trading's the idea where you try to find something of equal value on both sides. Even sentiment can play into that, dude. It's not a pawn shop when you're trading just someone along. And there are laws in some states in America that trading's not exactly like a good idea. Because, like, for me, it'd be stupid because I'd end up trading something important for something non-important. And then I'd be like, just like I was in the undergraduate school, totally beguiled by why I should have never picked up the Communist Manifesto. No, I'm kidding you. Listen to this. Just because you read a book doesn't mean you change into the things you read. Now, some books can be dangerous, though. Like anything by David Hume with that amount of skepticism and that amount of cynicism, the book reading process could go wrong. Like, you could be caught on a word, flip the page, see the next 3 words on the next page, and it can knock you over if you read that kind of philosophy the wrong way and don't get what they're saying. That can stop your heart. These philosophies are dark, beastly, dark magic of philosophy. Philosophy's worse than magic because you can intimidate scenarios even beyond magic into philosophical, theoretical situations that can catastrophize even the catastrophes. It's like a series of catastrophes leading to the final catastrophe seems to be this constant state we're in. And so communism is saying, well, that's because we've invented this thing called money and we've already overspent it so much that we can't spend anymore. Which doesn't make sense because we could spend it on our debt if we wanted it to. We wouldn't be able to pay it all off because then we'd be out of money and have to go back to the salt mines to work it off. Or we could buy what we need while it comes across as we can afford it as we're getting our paychecks. Like, I don't just live on these, like, extensive paychecks either. I'm talking about, like, my disability covers, like, my broken back and my broken hip, which could one day put me in a wheelchair. It hasn't yet, but the leg's pretty unusable. That back up in here is pretty unusable. It's just bones all crushed. And they've been that way for years. So I'm collecting, like, insurance for that, and it wasn't even, like, workman's comp. And I couldn't do that in a communistic society. I'd be sent to the salt mines like everybody else so we could earn our 5 cents worth of tobacco by working all day on a salt mine, which is just where you take a pickaxe and swing it at a salt mine. But these interims are getting interesting, and I'm getting kind of off the topic. The point is a book, maybe in a genre with all these, like, feats of narrative caveats. It may be a philosophy book with all these dangerous ways of wording things that we don't want to confront, but we have to confront to stop the plug in the tub or whatever is leaking out all the information or water or whatever. So some books can be dangerous to their philosophy. But I'm telling you, as many times as I've read Communist Manifesto and Mein Kampf, I can see where those books are coming from, and I could go into an even longer lecture on both. And I do recommend them to college students because they have a lot to do with what happens in college and how you learn. And one's kind of a despot and another one's like a country of zombies, It's like, and we're all making fun of it, but you can't make fun of it without knowing what it is. And really, it's just a step before capitalism. Even John Hospitals will tell you that. Communism. But I'm not really a communist and I've read the book. See, that's something that's hard for us to realize. If someone asks you to read a book and you're interested in that person, or you're interested in that class as a film class or whatever else, read the book as much as you can. Find out the parts you like in the book. Kind of highlight them. Not with a highlighter, just put a little tab in your page, like a little piece of paper, and say, this is what sums up the book to me. I haven't even read the whole book. But get interested in books. Don't be afraid of them. When I read Mark Twain as a kid, I didn't run out and call any of my African American friends the N word. I also didn't kill anyone after I saw Natural Born Killers. I mean, not always is something guaranteed to just carbon copy itself off the artwork and start taking place in reality. Unless it's the Van Eyck Museum, then everyone goes in and out of the paintings as they please. No. But I'm just saying, the point is that, like, I see one thing I gotta admit is I don't really like the Bible. It's pretty useless in so many ways. But since people do want you to read it, just read a couple sections and be like, it did kind of make sense here. It's just not for me. That's a polite way out of it. But it's also not much of an intellectual book unless you're in some kind of comparative scripture course where you're reading real scripture from real scrolls versus these like watered down Bible maxims that keep getting changed daily on the internet. And the Bible has changed so much on the internet that each day that goes by, the Bible changes again and again. And I want to write a section of it someday. I'm going to write a book, the Book of Aaron, yeah, the Book of Aaron. And we're all going to go down for, it'll be like this guy stuck under a tree like Jonah, and he's trying to read the Communist Manifesto. And every time a good idea comes across the page, boom, an apple falls from the tree and hits him on the head like Isaac Newton. And then he loses his place in Communist Manifesto, and then he just starts chanting, John Hospers will save me. But right then he realizes that most of dead people's bank accounts are closed and can't be reopened. And that's just something we're going to have to deal with in some kind of a genre melodrama, like Greed, where this movie is like the McTeagues are becoming rich off of dentistry all of a sudden after being poor, and their cousins and their friend, and they all get mixed up at the amusement park, and then they go on to kind of have this legacy, and everybody starts fighting. Those three start fighting each other for all that's left of the money because most of it was spent willy-nilly and haphazardly, and it all ends up in the desert where where McTeague and his friend are chained to a horse, dying on the ground of thirst, and pointing guns at each other and dying like vultures start circling them. The end. It's an 8-hour movie. I, for one, would like to see the other 4 hours the Turner Classic Movies didn't get of Greed. But my point is that even greed is looked at not necessarily as an addiction syndrome or a narcissistic have to have, but more of a biological process that takes all men to the route of what they need, which is money. But when it's coming in, sometimes you forget that you got to keep working to pay the next bill that comes after that. So it's just a good habit, my friends, that if a teacher assigns a book, whether you like it or not, if you're in a religion class and the teacher assigns the Quran, read it. If you're in a religion class and they tell you to read the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu book, you read it. Now, I'll go a little easier on my Christian classes and say we're not studying like direct Christian things. The ones of us that are studying the ancient pastor like Hebrew Bible or even Nag Hammadi or something religious about a religious book from a long time ago that still has reasoning now. And then there's that whole Bible theory that, well, the Bible's got it all too, The Bible's got aliens, it's got monsters, it's got dragons, it's got giants, it's got wizards, it's got sorceresses, it's got giant war scenes, it's got the Vino did flow stuff, it's got, and then in the New Testament, it's all these people crying over the fact that they never got to know Jesus before he died, and it's Jesus telling everyone he's about to die. Now, this part seems absurd to me, the New Testament, and I wish they'd have taken it out of the Book of Mormon, too, this whole idea that a guy named Jesus even existed, because, like, Jesus is a name still used in South America, so do you think that if some dude told you his name was Jesus in America, that would offend you? Because then you'd be like, well, Jesus, he's the guy that saved the whole world just by dying. Which makes no sense anyway. It wasn't like the whole world was coming at him and then he just died and then the world went back to normal. He must have been on some severe, like, memory retraction juice or something. I don't know. Because, see, to me, the story of Jesus doesn't really make sense. It's like he tells everyone he's going to die and that's how they're all going to live forever. And then he dies. But the weird thing about it is he told the guy that he was walking towards the death penalty area, the executioner's areas, and preaching that he knew for a fact he'd die on the cross. What did they do? They said, because you're suicidal and want to die on a cross, you're going to go up there and die on a cross. Way to go. You just put yourself to death. I mean, these Roman centurions didn't just outsmart him. They said it's illegal to go here ranting you're going to die unless you want to die, and that's against the law to want to die unless you've been, put the death sentence on. And this kind of logic will get you nowhere. Also, these things that Kierkegaard discusses about free love in the Bible. There's no free love in the Bible. Everything's bought and paid for and sold before they wrote the book. The prostitutes cost money in the Bible. God costs money in the Bible. And we've all gotten into these habits where, like, these Pope guys can have us pay them. And we're no longer sinners and we get to read the Bible again with a clear view. And I'm not saying they're slipping us a different copy with other problems foregrounded and other problems backgrounded, but it's pretty easy to do that with the Bible printers they have. But I'm not getting into it all except to say, don't forget, there are atheists that read the Bible not for wisdom, just to read it. Read for the sake of reading. It's a lower level of reading, so I wouldn't always command my students to read anyone lower than a high standard book. So like Hume, maybe a little too high standard for now, because Hume, I've actually flipped pages and flipped back, and just by doing that to those words, I couldn't stand anymore. I couldn't breathe. One time when I was reading War and Peace, I had a panic attack during the battle where that cannonballs were flying and Prince Andrei on his horse is riding along and he's looking over here and he's seeing people get shot and there's this whole, it's like a painting that moves, that whole section. But it's 100 pages of the 1,400 pages that is a longer book than the Bible, War and Peace. And now War and Peace is Russian, so now we've all got problems because Tolstoy must be bad if he's from Russia, because everything from Russia is bad. It's not very communistic either, because the Kremlin has already kind of merged into this sort of deity of money. But I will say this, the war scene was intense, but I was getting too into it with Hume and War and Peace, because when I got so into it that I was about to find the answer, I had a panic attack just from reading a book. But that's different than me believing it's real. I didn't really go live the battle that they were talking about in War and Peace, whether there was one or not at that time that was anything like that. I didn't go relive the battle and think I was Marcus Aurelius predicting the battle and all this. I was so intent about getting further in the book with all these blockades going on of the language and the explosions, and you just want to stop for a while, but you want to get through that whole 100-page war scene. It's brilliant. It's the best war scene in book history. It reminds me of the battle in Birth of a Nation where they're doing Civil War things. But either way you go, whatever movie you watch, whatever music you listen to, you could listen to satanic music all day and not be a Satanist. You could listen to... That's why I think the Christian one is off limits for my class, because it's all watered down when you get to that point. It's like, we can't say anything that would offend you, so please don't offend us. It's like this lightweight kind of namby-pamby thing where it's not like God's going to smite you down for being like a coffee thief, or that the church is going to turn you in because you had extra piece of pie that night for dinner, so we're just kicking you out of your house, or you smoked a bowl out back, so now it's the end of the world, And I'm like, well, there's some leeway on some of these things that are harmless, but we don't want to dumb it down either. So that's why in these classes, these film classes or whatever, we don't always bring up the cult cinema or the B cinema, or even the manufactured films of, say, the 80s that were comedies. We don't always bring all that up. Not that Caddyshack is the worst movie. It can be very funny. It can be kind of one of those no thinkers where you just take out your brain and let your brain dry out and just watch Caddyshack. I'm not saying that these are wretched things to do. I'm just saying they're really watered down to the point that it's really paint by number. It's really easy to see what a kid's going to say if he misses his golf shot. It's going to make us all laugh, and that's like some bad word. And so the thought of a simplistic education should come earlier in like fourth and fifth grade in high school, and about after the fifth grade, the Bible's only useful for like the philosophy of religion. And in that one, you can't really pick much up from the Bible, but the readings, the headings beforehand, you can. I don't like when the book is so simplistic that it gets degradingly warped into everybody's myth. That's not what I'm talking about. These genres that have sturdy myths, they don't just come from like all the holy books either, just because they're divine in genre. There's really very little that comes from scripture, except in maybe Bollywood films, but there and some Middle Eastern films, especially Iran, that really come from a source of text that's from a divinated spirit or divinated God. Like I've heard Muhammad quoted before, and he makes a lot more sense than Jesus because it's like be strong, be diligent, be nice, and if there's someone from another country, you don't have to regard them as your brother, but you should be polite to them. I mean, that's straight out of the Quran, and then the Bhagavad Gita is like find someone you love so that one you can embrace, so that one you can kiss, so that one you can make love to. These are good ideas. The Bible's more like, well, it's a Kierkegaard all over again. It's like, well, tried to make love once, got a disease, gonna die a virgin. But all for the sake of knowing that God loves me because I don't have sex with anyone. I mean, it gets very imbalanced when you get these simplistic ideas mixed with like this total decay of an idea at all. It's like they couldn't find anything to put there, so they just started ranting off their own Protestantism in all of these English translations. And you got to realize the Bible wasn't written in English originally. The word the Bible is an English word, coming from bibliotech, which stems somewhere from biblium or something from Latin, which is also Gnostic language, which is like the Bible isn't even a book yet, really, when they're putting the assembled Latin together until they released the Vulgate in like 1300, 1200 AD at the end of the sort of papacy before the Middle Ages. The Bible comes out in like this handwritten form called the Vulgate, and it's all in Latin, and it's the first written form of it. So all the Greek that had come before in the Old Testament and all the Hebrew in the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible was technically called, and it's really warped when it's mixed with the New Testament. The Old Testament's nothing like the Hebrew Bible. It kind of is, but kind of isn't. And then they say in Christianity not to believe that anyway, but then the Christian Bible doesn't match the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible has ways of matching every other book through the Nag Hammadi and Gnosticism. But the point is the written word, other than these lost Hebrew volumes that like were kept secret by the religious types, and the Vulgate explains what my theory. My theory is you release the book to everyone, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. We'll all agree it was a good book and go home happy. But is it really going to make my choices different? Is it really going to make me any kind of different person if I read the Communist Manifesto and don't become a communist? Or if I do? If I did, would it really mean that I wouldn't have to work anymore? Well, I don't have to work as much anymore because I broke my hip, but I'm here giving you an interim masterclass because we're talking about what kind of schoolwork it takes to take one of these college courses, and we need to start reading more in class in terms of books assigned. And if you all have any ideas of books to be assigned, I'd love to hear your suggestions. But quite frankly, I don't buy the idea that you like become the movie or become the book or become the song. You can dance along to the song without agreeing it or knowing what it's about or anything. A lot of times in the 70s rock, they'll put in lyrics that you can't understand, and they'll be kind of vile in what they mean. I just found the song Hotel California to have this kind of vile ending where it's like this Antichrist Rosemary's Baby Rising type thing, and it's scary, but it's done in such a like unbetrothed way that you hear it, you sing along with it, and yet you're not running around like a serial killer axe murderer. So you get my point. You don't always change into the ideology of the sermon of the writer. Because I can read Demarque de Sade and not change into an asylumist or a bedlamist. And I can read Plato and his Republic and relate it to today's republicanism, which fits in democracy. Or I can relate it to what the Democrats were saying the Republic was, the city, the township, the polis outside of it, the caste system, the way people multiply when couples or a man and a woman have a kid together. And in the Greek society, it was like the man was always with other men until it came time to breeding, and then they'd go check out all the women at once, and they'd each pick one. And then give birth with that, and that would make the polis even better, and boom, bada bing, you have a republic growing, a growth of a republic. But he's talking about the polis as though it's been hierarchicalized by the aristocracy, and it's a very capitalist gain. Even Neoplatonists and Neo-Hegelians would kind of side with that Ayn Rand assurance that if we build and labor, build machines that help us work, and Marxism says that too, if we build machines that help us work, then we'll be making more progress because the work will be a lot less because the machines will be doing some of it. But we still got to program the gosh dang machines. So, the only reason I read all this to you is it can be really, it's important for the theory and the philosophy that we read it, especially the complicated chapters that we don't want to. I'm not saying Mein Kampf is really the most educational book, but the Communist Manifesto is. And it really, I don't agree with anything from page 1 on. When it says the modes of labor capital are set up by certain deterrents of the crisis stock and the stock of mentality and the stock of physicality and stuff, I've known people that have had all those quadrants way off the map, and they still weren't necessarily being aided in any way by being in a communist country. Economics is economics, you know. So it's not always related by what happens or what you've read. And I know that there's this whole idea, like it came really from the biblical culture as well as the communist culture, that you could be converted to an idea once you read about it. True to any idea. But don't go around banning books that we don't believe in, because then you're going to have to go back to it and look why you don't believe in it. Because otherwise you'll go back to it, it'll be a different copy, and it'll be all updated to your namby-pamby likings. You know, even if everybody, it's like peer pressure, even if everybody else in the world believed in communism, would I really have to? And deep down, just because I say I do, does that really mean I do? And if I understood the book and like it as a book, that's okay. It doesn't make me have to go sit on some blacklist campaign and say, well, I like the Communist Manifesto so much, I'm going to pull a D.W. Griffith, and for the last of my remaining years, except for when I go to war and back, I will suffer for my communism greatly by sitting in this lonesome cell and thinking about all that went wrong with Birth of a Nation. Which is all you can do is become a communist after you've seen that film, because geez, man, the South was a socialist environment, and if they won the war, let's all go left wing. Now, I'm kind of being a jerk about this politic thing, but politics can really shape, and the reason I like about philosophy of politics is you can really take the sting off of politics and say, well, these are the types of things that are in the sort of contemporary Republican ideology versus the liberal cosmopolitan ideology. And the only reason I'm saying that liberal cosmopolitan reality is safer is because it includes all the other realities in it too. So the Republican need for a dentistry job to bolster your family to the most of its success is right there for you to work it, for you to struggle through it, and for you to earn the right to buy the magazines that'll be sitting around as the patients get ready to get their treatment. That's what dentists spend their money on, is magazines. For the nurses and everything, they just buy the nicest magazines they can, have them sitting there, so that way you're reading a nice National Geographic and you forget you're about to get a root canal. You know? And when you're getting a root canal, all you can picture is that wombat laying upside down, and you're like, do I look like a wombat laying upside down to you, dentist? And really, you may have just come off of some homework assignment that you totally disagreed with that made you read the Satanic Bible or something in a religion class, and you're going, Dude, that thing he said about making other people's heads explode. Well, it feels like somebody's getting through the screen right now and sending me some bad vibes. But this is being recorded and sent back, so I don't know if brainwaves travel that way. Let's see. Oh, that guy back there, his head was hurting. Never mind, we won't do that. So we're just having fun and knowing that, like, really, and that's what I mean by fun, is don't let it hurt you too bad if the author doesn't agree with you. Now, personally, I don't like communism. I preach against it. I say that everybody's fair in earning the amount they have to spend on what they want. What they want. Free market, you know. But communism is just saying your basic needs are provided for. Everything else is off limits except for you being a long-time worker at a factory or something to build something that everybody needs. But what I'm getting at is either way, it's not that it's outdated. It's not that I just don't like it. It's just that if you had 6 billion people on Earth and everybody was a communist, nothing would ever get done. The labor, the technical and technological, and even factorization, factories and industry, all that require on the market being open for the utility of the device they're receiving, buying, to affect them in some way ethically positively by having lesser to do in terms of the realm of that object doing it for us in almost this David Hume induction way. And then we just don't think about it. When we turn on a light switch, we just don't think about why it comes on. We don't stop and draw a chart of like the flowing energy this way being stopped this way and how the switch cuts off the flowing energy up to the light, which reservoirs at the end, you know. And you can kind of like dream of all the light ways a light works, and you're fine. But when the light doesn't turn off right now, even though I think, hey, light, turn off, the light didn't turn off right now. So even though my phone answers to some commands by like, hey, make me look really handsome, phone. See, kind of listen to that one, but it's got a different perception of what I look like handsome. So now, and I don't even know if I do, I just had a couple of girls tell me that one time, but that's not the point. These influences, to be above the influence and really truly be reading, is to read the book for what it's about, not how the book relates to your own opinion. You can do that later in PhD when your opinion is derived from the great books as being where all your opinions come from. So later you can cite either the critique on communism, and here's why. Now, I've never done one of those papers because those kind of tick teachers off, because most teachers believe in like a lot of truth of the communism, and I'm with you there. But ultimately, as a theory, as a practice, I don't practice it, and I don't really sit around theorizing it like I used to, and I probably should in this line of work. But the point is don't think that just because you're going to read Communist Manifesto in college, even in one of my classes eventually, that doesn't mean you're honestly already a commie. You know, the whole propaganda of I was a teenage commie and shit doesn't make sense. Because it's like, well, it's like, that's like saying I read the end of the Bible where the world ends and the world didn't really end. You know, was it supposed to? When I got to the end of the book, the world ended, but I looked up, nothing had changed, and it was still the same old boring story. But I know there's kind of a metaphysics of books and who's touched the original copies, usually the author, and somehow that original copy has been the one that's been, you know, duplicated, and somehow we can trace back our energy to the energy of the writer, even like Homer, who's one of the first writers of Iliad and Odyssey, and we can kind of get his tension just from the words. And I agree with that. But that doesn't mean I gotta go start a war myself in ancient Greece, like take a time traveling device and go back to ancient Greece and fight Poseidon with my time machine. I'll leave that for Percy Jackson. Anyway, it's been good talking to you on this interim. I'm sure I'll explain it more in Masterclass what I'm talking about, but you aren't necessarily what you are just because you read that there was a major influence to go that route. But once you read that, you're still going to have to put your shoes back on, go for a long walk to a nearby, marketplace, and put your application in, because those movies I'm talking about in class and showing you, a lot of them are criterion, and you're going to have to get a job, or be like me and just fall down so many times that you can't get back up, right? I've fallen and I can't get up. Well, the good thing about both of those is existing in capitalism, we're still able to achieve the objects of our desire. It's just that I have to kind of use them to function into my work of whatever that is. And anyone else can buy whatever they want. They don't have to buy work related items unless their work requires it. But as a disabled, you're always buying work related items because that's where your source of income comes, and that's what you want anyway, is a book, a movie, or a music. But I'm just explaining it to you real fast. But let's take a book from down here and see what it is. All right, Utopia, Sir Thomas More. I love this book. I'm not much of a Democrat, but it's a utopia, which means that it's capitalism and communism. It means that everything's sharing with everybody else. They're all coexisting. They're all living the same sort of atheistic religion. They're all transcendental meditators. They've all got enough land to have as their own. All the people in England is like this total utopia. Like even after Robin Hood, like it even gets to where everybody, even the poor, are rich, and everybody's got everything figured out. So then you get into the first section, which is like the Thieves Guild, and the second part's about murder. And the more he preaches about how thieves and murderers are going to end the society, like he's some kind of like Jesus moralist, the more he talks about the thieves taking things away, the thieves take more things away. Even from the sentences of what he's saying, they take it away. You can go back and you're like, wow, thieves stole those words. Because words change in a book how they're positioned. I'll be there in a minute. And the words in the book can kind of change their order even when you're reading them just by the way they're typed and printed. And that's kind of a magical thing we don't talk about. But if I read to you the Utopia, do you really think suddenly the whole world would become a utopia? Do you really think there's more than like 10 scholars who believe that this is really something we can petition our world to change to? And isn't it a total aping of Marxist communism? Or is it a more socialistic, determined, we still got to have jobs so we can sew the clothes together that we want to wear that are so beautiful? And it doesn't show Thomas More's hat in this, but his hat was super expensive, so he had to write this book to pay for it. Now, I'm kind of kidding, but books are dangerous. Utopia is dangerous because when you read it, you think the world's suddenly like all agreeing with it. And then you get to the end and everybody's murdered and killed and stolen from, and it was never a utopia anyway. Like the disillusionment comes over and there's no closure. But in the simple reality, we strive for the ideal of a utopia. Doesn't mean we take Thomas More's like dry, like Canterbury Tale kind of way through it. But it does mean we strive for a higher ethic sometimes. And as we concentrate on that, we're going, well, I won't need these books that are all black and white about everything. I'll need something with the room of ambiguity to study why there are differences between one object and another. And I could get into it even more. But the point is the deconstruction we're having is off the Communist Manifesto on the Utopia. They're similar books because they're ideals. Ideals are the way a society is, and it's so idealistic we don't have money, or it's so idealistic we have all the money, or it's so idealistic we use money just for decorum in utopia. Whatever it is, the book's not going to turn you into a Democrat instantly. If I had a book like that, I'd hand it out to all my students and say, read it, and they'd all walk back to his Upton Sinclair or something. That I'll be walking back and they're like, wow, I'm a left-winger now. You? Yeah. I don't want to kill Bambi no more. I'm a left-winger. You? Yeah, I'm an atheist now. That some of those depictions were of ideals and idealism were getting to be a bit Marxist now, weren't they not? So just remember that when you're reading a book, you don't necessarily have to believe in it. That's one of those traps we have from being a biblical society. Oh, you have to believe it when you read it. I don't know of any book where you have to believe it just because you read it. If it's convincing, that just means it's a convincing argument. He's not trying to convert you. No one's trying to convert you to like be like an ancient Greek in a way that like Bacchus worship or Orpheus worship. Nobody's asking you to go back in time and be a pagan in that way. But you can read about it in Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy, and you're like, mind blown. That happened in history. History seems like a sci-fi movie to me. But I'm not sitting around going, well, I read that one, and now I got to read Ayn Rand's Fountainhead again because it's the only way to get my capitalism back. Like I read Utopia, and now I need my Ayn Rand back. And it kind of works that way with music. If you listen to a lot of soft stuff and want to listen to some harder stuff, yeah, to kind of sort of. But the soft stuff and the hard stuff doesn't necessarily agree when played together. You see what I'm saying? And then the soft stuff isn't necessarily less technical than the hard stuff. It's just some people prefer soft music, some people prefer it loud, some people prefer both. Will it change their moods? Maybe loud music can make you a little angrier, maybe soft music can make you a little sadder. Because of the characteristics of the music that match the mood, like a mood ring or something. But I can tell you right now, one more time I'm going to say it, you can read the Communist Manifesto without becoming a communist. There are Chinese communists. Russians were not liking Russia right now, obviously, because they're killing people for more land. They sound like those old school dudes that would hang out on their porch and just shoot at anyone that goes by and be like, I want my land back. And they don't even know how to get to that land. But they've been misinformed, they've been mispropagandized, and most of them haven't read the Communist Manifesto and have no idea how it works. But if you read it, you won't necessarily become a Russian communist. If you read Tolstoy, it won't transport you to Russia. There are some safekeeping we know about books. Hume may throw you down, Dianetics may throw you down in a couple of places. You know, all philosophy books have kind of a throwdown moment where the philosopher king establishes his critique. But just because you're thrown down by the idea doesn't mean you have to agree or disagree with it. If you have to learn the concept, that's objective. But if you have to believe the idea, that's subjective, and relatively everybody believes in the same idea, just a different bit perspectively different. All right, that is a little Masterclass Interim. I hope you learned something. We'll talk more in a week or two just about the coming class, the Western. It's actually hitting at the end of April 29th, I think is my day, but I'll get exact on that soon. Love you guys. Have a good day. We'll talk more about Masterclass later.